So we're going to start chapter one today. And chapter one is an important chapter because it really gives you the foundation for how medical terminology works and really sets you up for the rest of the semester. So in this particular video, and I'm going to try to keep these videos short, in this particular video, we're going to talk about why we use medical terms, where these terms originally come from, how the terms are formed, how we put together actual medical terms, and then a little bit about how they're pronounced. And it's important that you understand how to pronounce these words. And there will be exercises for you to, as we go through the semester, for you to practice pronunciation. There are other videos for chapter ones where we look at common roots, suffixes, and prefaces. Those are separate to try to keep these videos short. They're important because those common roots and suffixes and prefaces will reoccur in every chapter after this. So if you can nail those now, the better off you're going to be going forward in the semester. So why do we use medical terminology? First, it's important to be clear. And so by using medical terms, you can communicate with other medical professionals in a very clear and simple manner. It's quick. You can use one word instead of a whole paragraph of description to explain what's going on. And it really gives comfort to patients. The patients won't necessarily understand what the medical term means until you explain it to them. But by using medical terms, it gives the patient a feeling that you know what you're talking about, that you are in control and you know what's going on. So it's important that they feel that somebody's in charge and somebody knows what's happening. And by using medical terms and then explaining those medical terms to the patient, that helps comfort them and reassure them that, yes, you know what you're doing and you're a professional. Most of these terms come from ancient languages, ancient and sometimes referred to as dead languages because they're no longer actually spoken. Greek and Latin are the two most common languages that they come from. Most of science and most of medical science was discovered at a time when language barriers were crossed by using Latin. And so they would speak Latin in professional circles and use Latin terms as a way of crossing language barriers between, say, Italians and Germans. And the other reason that these languages were used is that since they're no longer spoken, their meanings are set in stone. Our language, English, changes every day. There's new terms invented every day in our language, and it's constantly evolving. And so meanings are constantly changing. These terms based in ancient languages that are no longer currently spoken are set in stone and they don't change. There are also going to be eponyms. These are usually diseases or disorders that are named after a specific person. Epo means on and nym means name, so it's named on the person. So it can be named for the person who discovered it, like Alzheimer's disease, or it could be named for a very famous person who suffered from it, like Lou Gehrig's disease. Lou Gehrig's disease is ALS, anterolateral sclerosis. And finally, we use a lot of acronyms. And again, the very word acronym breaks down. Acro means the end of something, and nym means name again. So it's a word that's built out of the initial ends of the words. So MRI is magnetic resonance imaging. EKG is electrocardiogram. The K for cardio comes from the German spelling of cardio. Sometimes you'll see it as ECG. And then there's a CABG, would be coronary artery bypass graft, and just briefly referred to as CABG. So you'll come across these quite a bit. And at the end of each chapter of each system, there'll be a list of common abbreviations or acronyms for that body system. Finally, some words do just come from English, French, or German. We can't name everything from Latin or Greek or name them after somebody or use acronyms, so sometimes we just have new English words or new French words or new German words that mean these things. So medical terms themselves, each word, each medical term can function as a sentence, a rough sentence, but a sentence. It'll have some sort of root, and the roots are the foundation or the subject of the term, and that's usually acts as a noun in a sentence. Oftentimes they'll have a suffix. It's very common to have a root and a suffix. And occasionally you also have a prefix. So the suffix functions to give essential meaning to the root, explains what's going on with the root, and then the prefix can add more information about what's going on. You'll see as we go forward here. When you see a new medical term, it's important that you translate the suffix first, then the prefix, and then finally the root. So here's some examples of words you may have heard of. Cardiology, you probably all know what that means, but let's break it down and translate it as we would any new medical term that we don't know what it means. So cardio is the root, so it's important that you be able to identify the roots in each of these words. Logi is the suffix, so translate the suffix first, and you get the study of. Then you translate the root, cardi is heart, and then put them together. Cardiology is the study of the heart. Let's try another one that you may or may not have heard of. Atrophy. In this word, troph is the root, Y is the suffix, and A is the prefix. So when you translate the suffix first, the suffix Y means a condition or a procedure, but in this case, a condition. A is the prefix, means no or not, and troph is the root. So remember, suffix, then the prefix if there is one, and then the root. And then you have your sentence. So atrophy means a condition of no growth. That's literally what it means. More commonly, it's used to refer to tissue that's wasting away, that is doing the opposite of growing. It's withering. So in the word cardiology, we saw that when you're given the root cardio, it had the slash and the O. That's a combining vowel. And that's how you can join different word parts together, particularly roots to other things. When you see a list of roots for a given body system, you'll see it listed as the root slash and then the combining vowel that you use with that root. So for example, cardi is the root, O is the combining vowel. O happens to be the most common combining vowel, but sometimes you'll find others, E or I sometimes. So when do you use the combining vowel? When you're adding a suffix, and this is probably the most common place you'll use combining vowels, when you add a suffix to a root. And if that suffix begins with a consonant, then you add the combining vowel. But if the suffix does not begin with a consonant, if it begins with a vowel, then no combining vowel is used. So if you look at cardiac, the suffix is "-ac", and it begins with a vowel, so you don't need the combining vowel. Cardiology, the suffix is "-logi", and so it begins with a consonant, and you need that combining vowel. The other place you find combining vowels are when you add two roots together. Sometimes you want to talk about not just one organ, but two organs, and those would be the roots of the word. So, for example, hepatosplenomegaly. Hepatico means liver, spleno means the spleen, and megaly means large. So you want to talk about the fact that both of those organs are enlarged, you would say hepatosplenomegaly. To join hepatic with splen, you need that combining vowel. I'll give you more examples as we talk about common roots in the next video. So how do you pronounce these words? Really, the key here is getting the emphasis on the right syllable. So in addition to breaking terms into the root, the suffix, and the prefix, you're going to need to break them into syllables. And these syllables get named. The very last syllable is the ultima. The second to last syllable is the penult. And then the third to last syllable is the antepenult. And it's the antepenult that gets the emphasis. Almost always, not always, but almost always. And that's in American English. So if you look at the term cardiac, again, you're probably familiar, you've heard that word a lot. Break it into syllables, cardiac, and it's that there's the ultimate, penult, and the antepenult. In your textbook, it will capitalize the syllable that gets the emphasis. So cardiac. If we change that a little bit to cardiology, okay, you break that into syllables, cardiology, count backwards, the ultimate, penult, antepenult. It's the O or the aw sound that gets the emphasis. Cardiology, cardiology. Your practice assignments and in your textbook and on the tests, you will need to be able to identify the correct pronunciation. Now, in your textbook, when you get each chapter gets a list of words, there's a little button next to each word that will pronounce that word for you. And you'll see it spelled out phonetically as well in this manner here, as in pronounced as. Pay attention to those. It's important. Pronunciation is important because when you get into your chosen field and you start using these terms in your day-to-day life, you really want to pronounce them correctly or people will look at you funny and you will feel awkward. So don't skip over pronunciation. And that ends our video for today. Again, there are going to be 3 sub-videos where I talk about common roots that you need to get down, common prefaces and common suffices that you really need to nail in this first chapter before you move on, because they will come up again and again in all of the chapters.